Hello everyone, I'm SCJ and welcome back to my channel. Today I have something a bit more different for this video. The last time I did a discussion video like this, I was talking about the 2025 IndyCar schedule. But today I want to talk about one of the rumored F1 races that could potentially be happening soon. Like, we've seen a bunch of new rumors, I think celebrity media's expansion into new markets with Formula One, like there's the rumored race in Barranquilla, Colombia, a rumored race in Tanzania in East Africa, a rumored street race in Thailand, and heck, I think there was even the random rumor of Panama being thrown in there. Even the Chicago one, but that was shut down. But one of the rumors that seemed to be more likely to happen as early as 2026 is Korea, more specifically the city of Incheon. This coming from Beyond the Flag, the mayor of Incheon has submitted a letter of intent to host a Grand Prix on the F1 calendar, and it could happen as early as 2026. And as you can see here, it wouldn't be the first time South Korea tried to host an F1 race. We, of course, had the Korea International Circuit in Yongnam on the country's southern coast. And if this were to happen, it would join Madrid as a new street course being added onto the 2026 calendar. And of course, not a lot of people are a fan of this new Madrid street course. I don't blame them. But that is a topic I will be talking about on the calendar. You know, the whole permanent circuit versus street course dilemma that Liberty Media is going on with. But this article here seems to confirm things from the Independent, a British source. South Korean city sends letter of intent to host F1 street race in 2026. The South Korean city of Incheon has submitted a letter of intent to Formula One about hosting a new race on a street circuit, possibly as early as 2026. The mayor of Incheon, Yoo Jung-bok, met F1 chief executive Stefano Domenicali at the Japanese Grand Prix in Suzuka over the weekend to deliver the letter. The Incheon district, close to the Korean capital, is keen to host a street race with a 2027 or 2026 start date. Now, for how this race could join the F1 schedule, there's a lot of theories out there going around, some of which have to do with the Chinese Grand Prix potentially getting replaced. It could probably just be put onto the calendar and make it a 25 race schedule, which is pretty insane to think about. Even today, with the record breaking 24 race calendar we had this year. But the first thing I want to talk about is the past attempt Korea had at hosting a Grand Prix. So there is a video out there by Perspective. I will link it in the description if you want to check it out. It goes over a lot of detail on how this race came and went pretty quickly on the calendar. It was initially, I think, supposed to host a race in 2009 on the Korea International Circuit, but construction issues got in the way, and then in 2010, when it did join, the infield looked very lifeless, and only 60 or 70,000 people attended, which today is basically nothing. And then financial issues started plaguing the race. They had to rework the deal for the organizers to save money. And after 2013, even though it was on a preliminary schedule, it never came back in 2014 or 15 due to the same issues I mentioned. And the reason why I said the infield looked lifeless in 2010 is because this course was supposed to be kind of a blueprint for a new major city being developed in and around the circuit. Basically, there's going to be all these high rises, all these luxury buildings and cafes, but people just weren't interested. Korea was still very new to the F1 scene, and not a lot of people understood, or not saying they didn't understand, it's just that they weren't really interested yet in Formula One. And not to mention the fact the location being in Yongnam was very problematic finding accommodation for all the teams and just fans traveling there, especially if you live in a major city like Incheon or Seoul. It's not fun. Now, that's not to say that motorsports in Korea is a complete failure. As you know, in the 2022 Formula E season, Seoul joined the calendar, and of course, it was kind of a bizarre race. It was put in as a doubleheader finale, and the race literally went through a stadium, more specifically Jamsil Stadium. The weekend, regardless, was a success. The racing was pretty exciting at some points. To be honest, Formula E pretty much always has exciting racing. That's pretty much part of their product. I know some people aren't a big fan of Formula E because they're electric and all of this, but I like Formula E just because it's different, and as I said before, the racing is exciting. So if you want exciting racing, I suggest giving Formula E a try. Although Seoul never rejoined the calendar after that because in 2023, Jamsil Stadium was undergoing renovations, and they did have a circuit excluding that section, but then suddenly the race never happened. That's not to say people weren't interested. It's just that Formula E, in my opinion, is always like rotating races. Like we've seen races in Morocco, Brazil, and other countries just come and go repeatedly because that's kind of how Formula E is. They're always testing out new countries and circuits. Now, one of the theories mentioned earlier for Korea being added onto the calendar was a potential replacement for the Chinese Grand Prix. We knew before that China couldn't host the Grand Prix from 2020 to 2023 because of COVID, and suddenly there was a rumor going around that Seoul could potentially replace the F1 race, whether that's just a stand in due to COVID or a permanent replacement. I can't find a source anymore. I could have sworn it existed because I saw something out there, but Liberty Media was looking at distancing themselves from China because I guess they're just not happy with how the country is ran and, human rights and all that stuff. Like, I'm not going to try to make this a political video about human rights and stuff. It's just something I saw out there, and I wouldn't blame them. However, if we're really talking about human rights, then why are we still holding, like, races in Qatar or Saudi Arabia? It just, like, make it make sense. And it's not just the human rights violations, it's also the fact that China is supporting Russia in the Russian-Ukrainian war, and that's pretty much why Russia was kicked off the F1 calendar in 2022. The FIA has made it pretty clear they don't want countries supporting Russia on their calendar. That's also kind of why we're not seeing South Africa being put onto the calendar, even though fans are kind of wanting a race in Africa. This source by Auto Racing One is saying, word is China President Xi Jinping would like to have a night race in Beijing, but Western companies are increasingly wary of government interference from China and its alliance with Russia in the war to take over Ukraine. It is safer to switch to other, more friendly countries, and South Korea fits that bill. Remember, Korea is one of the world's leading car exporters. Another thing I forgot to mention, kind of why Korea didn't take off in Formula 1. As you can see here, we have a track map of the Korea International Circuit. The track itself doesn't really offer much when it comes to racing. Like, we have a couple of long straights, especially turns 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 into hard braking zones for passing opportunities, but like everywhere else, it's a fast, sweeping track, which doesn't create many passing opportunities, if any. And not to mention, that pit entrance and exit was kind of asking for cars to get totaled. Now, I know some kind of want to hate on street circuits, and I don't blame them because more and more seem to be added on the calendar, and they're just not having as much character and not good for racing. However, we have kind of been proven wrong before. As we know, Azerbaijan had a few great races. 2017, 2018, and 2021 were all great races. However, all the other races were quite boring, unfortunately, and I hope 2024 doesn't go down that same route. That would really suck for the track. And I know people don't like Las Vegas because it's just an expansion into an American market which already had two F1 races, but at least we could say it was still better for racing than Miami. And I don't think we should always judge a track by how it looks on a track map. Sometimes. But when it comes to Liberty Media and trying to distance themselves from China, that isn't always seeming to be the case, at least according to Planet F1. This was back in 2019, though, so keep that in mind. Opinions might have changed, especially in this day and age. Liberty Media has stated their desire to add a second race in China to calendar to help establish a year-round presence and a big fan base. Keep in mind, in the earlier article, China did kind of want a street circuit in Beijing. We would love to have a second race here, Formula One's head of global sponsorship, Murray Bennett, told Xinhua. Probably not in the short term given how congested the schedule is already, but we'd certainly love to figure out a way to have another Grand Prix here. We're looking at a number of different things to try and generate more interest on a local basis. We can't just be here for 3 days of the Shanghai Grand Prix. I don't know if that's really an argument, but okay. However, I'd like to throw in one more source when it comes to the Chinese Grand Prix and for it potentially being replaced. On the official F1 website themselves, they state that the F1 Chinese Grand Prix contract was extended to 2025. And that's important because guess what year Incheon wants to start hosting a Grand Prix? 2026. But now I guess it's time to finally throw in my opinions on this matter. Although I am on the younger side of the audience, I do agree with most fans that we need actual permanent built circuits on the calendar. We have proven racetracks like Hockenheim in Germany, Sepang in Malaysia, and possibly even more, and yet they're being left on the calendar or in the process of probably getting replaced. Just look at Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium, for example. All for these possibly lifeless street courses that aren't going to produce good racing. And by lifeless, I don't mean that passion's not going to be there. I'm just saying that racing probably isn't going to be good. Just look at the first couple of years of a Miami Grand Prix. They just slap a street course onto a parking lot, and it was completely boring. And probably the only reason the 2024 Miami Grand Prix was exciting was because of a safety car screw up. And not to mention the whole talk about how many races on the F1 calendar is too much, because drivers and team members do get stressed when you put too much travel miles and time onto the calendar. Like, we're in a cost cap era after all, and yet we still have a stretch on the F1 calendar where we go from Europe to Miami, back to Europe, and then to Canada just to go back to Europe. It's like, it doesn't make sense why we're doing this. Again, I don't want to assume that a Korean Grand Prix being hosted in Incheon or Seoul is going to be a failure. I'm just saying we need to start striking a balance and start listening to the fans. But I will say, if Incheon does end up hosting a Grand Prix, I hope it is good. I do think they could find some streets in the city to have good passing opportunities. But I would actually like to see a street course take place in Seoul instead, because that's where they hosted Formula E and it was a success. And the Seoul as a whole, did not mean to make that rhyme, is pretty much started becoming an entertainment capital, being internationally known. Like, as you know, entertainment in the country is some of the best in the world. Um, K-pop, that whole phenomenon. Not gonna pretend I'm not a K-pop fan because I clearly am. In fact, I actually made a prototype of a Seoul street course within their city. Heck, I actually made my own concept of what a potential street course in Seoul would look like if it were to host F1. And here is the concept I came up with. This would be the first straightaway right here, passing by the baseball stadium right next to Jamsil Stadium. There will then be a right-hander and then a left-hander, or make that a double left-hander throughout one of the many neighborhoods within Seoul, and onto a right-hand turn right past what I would say some pretty cool-looking apartment buildings. There will then be a fast, round left-hander into what is, I guess, another fast but a sharper apex left-hander onto the second DRS straight and then a sharp left again before turning right back into the Jamsil Sports Complex. There will then be a left-right, kind of like what we see at Albert Park, and then we'll turn left and have a little zigzag back onto the main road. We'll then turn right down this ramp here onto the, what I can assume is the parking lot, I think, of the area. And then we'll turn sharply left into the final DRS straight, have another sharp left-hander, and turn back up the hill, and turn right again onto the front straightaway, and that would be a lap of Seoul. Keep in mind that these couple of areas right here might need a bit of construction to widen the road and make sure it's F1 ready, but I'm sure it could happen, assuming Formula E literally hosted a race inside a freaking stadium. And even though I think street circuit in Seoul would work much better, it doesn't mean that Incheon can't be a success. Like, they might be able to pull a rabbit out of the hat and actually host a good race and prove me wrong. That's my take, at least, on the potential F1 race in Korea. As I said before, I prefer F1 to be somewhat traditionalist and bring back actually good tracks, but you never know what could happen, especially in this decade. So if you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.